You probably believe that recovering from OCD takes years of therapy, maybe years trying to do exposure, resisting your compulsions, trying to deal with the uncontrollable and uncomfortable feelings in your body. And maybe you even believe that you will never fully recover or feel better. For me, I spent years trying to resist the obsessive, intrusive thoughts I was experiencing. I had constant dread and anxiety in my body, and I tried to resist doing compulsions. I spent thousands of hours in therapy trying to talk my way out of this. And it wasn't until I discovered that fighting OCD does not actually change. Understanding what OCD is the key. And today I want to share with you the 3 secrets that I discovered that helped me heal from OCD. And you can also do that too. Hi, I'm Linda Culliton, and I have helped over 1,000 people gain long-term relief using natural, profound practices. So for me, for years, OCD literally controlled my life. I was constantly stuck with obsessive, intrusive thoughts that really terrified me, and I felt so much anxiety and dread in my system. I would wake up in the morning with obsessive, intrusive thoughts, and it would last the whole day. And even before I go to sleep, I'd be in this constant cycle of, how am I going to get rid of these thoughts? What did these thoughts mean? I felt so bad. I felt so much shame. I felt so anxious. And at that time, sleep was my only relief. So I'd actually look forward to going to bed so that I could have some peace. And this was a constant cycle for years. I ended up going to different types of therapy. I'd done exposure, and it did give me some relief in the moment. But then a period of time would go by, I would be triggered, and I'd be back with the constant dread, the anxiety, the fear, the terror inside my system. And then I'd be gone in with the obsessive, intrusive thoughts. They would be looping constant. I would spend then time obviously doing compulsions because the feeling inside was so unbearable that I needed to find some relief by doing compulsive behaviours. So this is where I then became like a guard to my mind. I spent every waking hour watching my mind, watching every thought, and really kind of consumed with watching. Is this okay to think? Is this not okay? Very hyper vigilant, very hyper aware, really like having like a spotlight on myself, watching every sensation, terrified of every sensation. And I would have had so much anxiety in my body that it would feel really unbearable to cope with. I'd have to have a shower consistently to calm my system. I didn't realise I was actually doing that, but it was my natural instinct was just to go to kind of bring a sense of calm into my body. And this went on over and over again, no matter what kind of therapy I'd done, because I was really not understanding what OCD was. And really, when we bring it all back, that OCD is a trauma response. It's a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. And once I discovered this over years of searching for relief, things start to change. And today I want to share with you the 3 secrets that I discovered that I wish I had known earlier that really gave me long-term recovery in OCD. So the first secret is really understanding that the thoughts are not the problem. Now, I know you might be sitting there today with constant obsessive, intrusive thoughts, and you believe that if only you can actually not have these thoughts, you'll feel better. Okay, I get that. I've been in that position, and I spent so many years trying to fight these thoughts, thinking that that's the problem. But actually, it's your identification with those thoughts. It's that emotional response that's automatic. That is the root of it all. It's not a problem. It's actually an emotional wound that is being activated every time you're triggered. So for me, I had experienced obsessive intrusive thoughts of harm. So every time I'd have one of these thoughts and they were on loop, I felt guilt, I felt shame, I felt terror, I felt fear. I felt so many different, really uncomfortable emotions that I couldn't feel them. They were so deep and they were really activated that survival response in my system. So the natural way to cope with this was to go into my mind and try to obsess more and more about these thoughts. So my understanding was at the time was that if I can just actually change these thoughts, I won't feel these emotions. Because that's logic. That makes sense. But ultimately, if we don't address these emotions, the thoughts are just a distraction. They're just going to keep looping. They might move from one thought for a period of time to maybe another obsessive intrusive thought. That's been my experience and also the experience with clients that I have worked with. So because these emotions are deep repressed emotions and they have been activated and it's like they come alive and they really rise up to the surface. But because these emotions are really be like a trauma response. The nervous system is in this survival dysregulated state. And in that time, our only way to cope was to go into our head and obsess. And generally, for me personally, I had difficulty even feeling my emotions. I didn't really know what emotions were. Feelings weren't in my vocabulary. So this was just like a full-on trauma response in my body, and I couldn't be with that. And that's natural. So this is all a natural survival coping mechanism. But the more you spend time trying to change these thoughts and think that they're the issue, the more you're going to be forever trying to change the thoughts, because it's your relationship with your emotions that needs to be addressed, not the thoughts. And this was the first secret that I discovered myself through the journey and through the pain that I had felt and lived through, that I realised that this just wasn't clicking. Nothing was changing, because the emotions just kept showing up the same. Fear, shame, guilt, dread, anxiety. No matter what kind of mindset I tried to change, no matter what talking I tried to change, this was the constant loop. So once you understand this can start changing a lot of things for you. Now, I know your mind is so used to going, no, but that's not true, because it feels so real. Them feelings feel like these thoughts are the problem, and they keep you stuck in that loop. And I understand that, because you believe that if I can just get rid of these obsessive intrusive thoughts, I no longer feel like this. And that's where the catch is. That's where we become like years and years stuck in this cycle. But today I'm here to tell you that if you can just understand that's the mind, okay, that's the survival mechanism. That's the protection mechanism, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you obsessing over something so that you avoid these feelings because they're so big. Understand that it's your emotions. It's your relationship with your feelings, with these repressed emotions that are being activated over and over again. Now, it's not something that you're going to be able to actually go, okay, what do I do now? How can I be with these emotions? You're not going to be able to be with them emotions initially, because the activate is survival response. Survival response means that we just don't have logic. We don't have reasoning. When these are activated in our body, I don't have time to think about, that's just a bit, that's anxiety. No, I'm in that state of panic, dread, fear. So I'm going to have to do a compulsive behaviour, and it's automatic. So this is beyond your conscious reasoning. It's beyond your conscious control. So understand that this is not your fault. This is a natural chemical response. So with these emotions, you don't have to go to them directly, because it's going to be like completely foreign for you to do. So first you have to calm your body, start regulating your nervous system so that you start making space for you to be with your emotions. That's the first step. You don't try to go towards something that you've been terrified of. You regulate, you bring a sense of calm over time, a long period of time, and then you have space to be with your emotions. And by the way, if this resonates with you, or you'd like to find out more about my work, click the link below in the description. And the second secret went deeper. It wasn't just about logic or trying to understand. It was about understanding that trauma lives in the body, and dysregulated nervous system is showing up in the body. It's not just up here. Here is where we think, and here is where we feel. So when we're in dysregulated trauma response, a dysregulated nervous system, no amount of talking or trying to tell ourselves to calm down will change this. We're literally in a survival response. And this is where we have to bring in certain practices, first and foremost, like a foundation of a house. When we're building a house, we have very strong foundations. It's like the nervous system. When the nervous system is a constant default state. So in other words, I feel fear a lot. I feel dread a lot. I feel terrified. I feel shame. The nervous system is in this default dysregulated state. And unfortunately, most of us walk around in this most of the time, because it's become our familiar pattern. We've experienced these emotions at some level in our life, past experiences, and they become repressed. They were too big to feel at one time, and we couldn't feel them. So therefore, they become repressed. And when they're activated, because they don't just go away, they don't just disappear. I wish they did, but that's not how it happens. And when they're activated, they flood our body with these feelings that you are terrified to feel. So the first step is, as I said, you don't need to go towards the emotions. You build the foundation first, the strong foundations within the nervous system. And how that works first is that you develop a consistent daily practice. What I teach is, I teach specific breath work for OCD. This is what I've done personally myself. And I do this daily over time. And what happens is that the foundation starts to become more strong. What does that look like? Well, it means that instead of the nervous system constantly being in this default state, it will start coming, maybe changing the pattern pattern over time. This is over time. That's why the practice is daily. The default state is no longer constant dysregulation, and it starts becoming more regulation. Now, there will be a period of time you're going to go from dysregulation, because that's been the norm for you, to regulation. So it'll constantly kind of go back and forth, okay? And that's natural. But you're starting to have more days where you're not in this constant heightened state of anxiety. Then we have to understand that these repressed emotions live in the body. They're not here, okay? They're in the body. So we have to start doing practices that bring some sense of safety into the body. And again, safety is just a word that we use. But what does it mean? It means I feel like okay inside myself. And this is, I bring in for myself, which I've done, is somatic trauma release. And this helps to re-regulate the nervous system. It helps again to bring a sense of balance into the body and into the mind. So once we start getting the body into some state of balance, in some state of feeling okay, the mind will also start to be less frantic. The thoughts will maybe become less intrusive. Now, sometimes they will activate for sure, because something that's been activated, a survival response, it is going to still default into survival at times, okay? But for me personally, it went from constant obsessive intrusive thoughts and compulsions to days where they were there, but I didn't have the same reaction. Some days it was activated big, but as I kept doing the practices, some days I didn't have any, and it was absolutely incredible. And then some days I did, okay? So it's going to be like up and down for a period of time. But once we keep practicing, we're literally rewiring the nervous system into having a new default state. It doesn't mean we'll never default into feeling anxious. That's going to happen. Doesn't mean you're ever going to default into feeling shame. If these are very deep emotions that have been impressed in at a young age, they are going to come back in. They are going to flare up at times. But there's a difference between having a moment or having a period of time where you're in these activated states, or having a constant obsessive intrusive thoughts, constant fear, constant worry, constant shame. And once you really start building this in, everything starts to change. But it does involve you being really committed to change. It does involve you committing to doing a daily practice. But if this is something that you feel like you would like to learn more about, you can find the link in the description below. And the third secret is the key to it all. This can help you unlock years of searching for a solution to OCD. And this is emotional integration. So our feelings are messengers. Okay, they're literally like sending us a message through our body. And because these feelings have been survival, they're being really repressed, it's natural, as I said before, to go into the head and ruminate and procrastinate and try to problem solve and try to do avoidance and try to do reassurance. These are all natural. They're all natural strategies, all natural coping behaviours. So in your nervous system, you don't have to go near the thoughts, trying to change any thought. You don't have to go near trying to change compulsive behaviours. If you can know that they're going to be there, they're part of the process, they're part of having symptoms of OCD. If you can just directly go to the nervous system and start doing practices to regulate your nervous system, that's step one, with the breath, with the trauma release. That's building the foundations. Then what we have been avoiding for most of our life to date is our feelings. And these feelings need to be addressed. They need to be really given attention. They need to be given presence. Now, when we do any sort of compulsive behaviours, there's part of us inside that's really afraid. There's a sense of unsafety. That's really at the core of it all. So when we build a strong nervous system and we regulate our nervous system day in, every day, we keep regulating our nervous system. We still want to be able to learn how to manage our emotions outside our practice. Because if we're just doing a practice to like, okay, I'm just doing this practice to get rid of these feelings, which is a natural thing to think, and then throughout the day we're triggered and we don't know how to be with our emotions, we don't even know what our emotions are, we're still going to feel victim to this cycle. We're still going to not feel empowered. We're still not going to understand what's actually going on with me. And I understand myself that this is really about self-discovery. You are learning about yourself. I had to learn about myself deeply. I had to learn how to be with pain, and I still do that. I still sit with my emotions. Is it easy? Always? No. But is it worthwhile? Yes. Is it liberating? Yes. Does it give empowerment? Yes. These emotions you feel inside, they're actually very vulnerable parts of ourselves that's in a lot of pain. Now, as I said, once you regulate the system, the pain is not so active, but the emotions are still there. They're just not active, okay? They're they're there. And what we have to learn, we can, if we choose to do, is sit with these emotions, sit with these parts of ourselves, these vulnerable, scared parts of ourselves, and give ourselves presence, give ourselves care, give ourselves love and compassion. And when you do that, what happens is that you will start to change the emotional reaction. You will start to give yourself what you always needed, which was comfort, love and compassion. But I could never do this from a place of where my nervous system was dysregulated, because in that emotional response, I don't have logic, reasoning. I am that fear. I am that shame. I feel it all over my body. I can't have space to go, oh, I'm going to sit with these feelings. It's not logic. I don't even have space in my awareness. And it's all about our awareness, where our attention is. When I'm activated in a survival response, my attention is in, how can I get rid of this? What am I going to do? I'm unsafe. I'm not saying them words, but I'm feeling like that. So I'm going to act out. I'm going to do compulsive behaviours. I'm going to look for reassurance. I'm going to soothe myself externally. Imagine these emotions are so ingrained in our nervous system as a threat. It takes time and it takes a dedicated practice. But if you're willing to do that, you're going to see huge changes. And then when that starts to all come together, you start being with your feelings. Slowly holding space for yourself every day. Holding space for where you feel them. You don't feel them in here. You feel them in your body. Maybe your tummy is generally where we can hold them, our heart centre, our throat. And we start holding ourselves there. We start placing our hands on where these emotions are, because they're truly messengers. You know, we get a message on our phone. You probably don't ignore it, no? I know I don't, okay? So imagine if we start treating ourselves like that, and we actually started, instead of ignoring our feelings, we started listening to them, we started tuning into them, we started responding to them the way we respond to other things. But that first comes after a practice. That first comes after months of regulating your nervous system. You're not going to have to throw yourself into trying to feel these emotions because you're terrified of them. So why put yourself in more pain? You're not going to want to do that. No one would want to do that. So that's why we have all these practices to help. You're starting to see that healing OCD does not mean controlling your thoughts. But what if you're doing the one thing that's actually keeping you stuck? Check out the video below and I'll share with you what that is.